With just 37 days to the start of the Rugby World Cup, the South African Rugby Union is refusing to confirm whether or not it was investigating claims that 5 black Springboks had approached Cosatu, voicing concerns over team selections. Since the dawn of democracy, transformation has been on the agenda for many sporting codes. Many have, however, cried foul about the slow transformation process. In light of the claims from Cosatu, and to take this discussion further, from Cape Town today, we are joined by our SABC Sport reporter, Craig Marrais. And in Johannesburg, we're joined from the Anti-Racism Rugby Committee spokesperson, Dr. Asad Bhorat. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just want to hear from you, Craig. Are you ready to join us in Cape Town? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you guys.
Okay. Craig, I would actually just like to start with you, specifically around the timing of these claims that Cosatu have now come out with. There have been talks around every single time we perform badly as a Springbok team, it's almost like we want to go back and find something, and some say we always do tend to go back to the transformation issue. What do you make of the timing? What do you make of SARU's response at this stage?
Well, there's no doubt when you're winning the games that the cracks get papered over, but it's something that's been building up for a long time since Marrais has taken over. When it comes to transformation, he's been way behind the 8 ball, and if you look at even Jake White and then Peter de Villiers, things certainly improved a little bit, but it's unacceptable in 1995 when South Africa won the World Cup in the Madiba Magic. There was 1 black player on the field, that was Chester Williams. And then on Saturday, losing to Argentina for the first time, there were 2 black players. So to have 1 extra player in 20 years is clearly unacceptable. And it just seems at the moment that Marrais has carte blanche when it comes to South African rugby. You know, that he doesn't seem to be buying into transformation. And it's not as if there aren't black players to choose from. Cosatu make a very good point that if any team has dominated in SA Rugby over the last 3-4 years, when Marrais has been the Springbok coach, has been Western Province and the Stormers, and they've got a 50%, if not more, when it comes to their team's players of colour. But the likes of, let's say, Jean de Jong or Cheslin Colby, Sabelo Sinatla, they haven't even made it into the Springbok squad. And then the black players that are there haven't had an opportunity because there are 40 players at the camp. He's got to take 31 players to the World Cup. So at least you want to give an Alton Yankees or Skara Intabeni or Sia Khaleesi. They haven't had any game time on the field to even stake a claim to get to the World Cup. And then obviously when you're playing a largely white team and they're not doing very well, then obviously the critics will come out.
Craig, I would actually, Dr. Asad as well, I would like to put this question to the both of you. Like you've mentioned, Craig, the process of transformation is one that cannot happen overnight. We saw the Minister of Sport, Fikile Mbalula, he tweeted yesterday, I hope we can throw that tweet up on screen, that it really is a process that takes time. But why is it taking so long, Dr. Asad, and what do you make of the fact that we have to wait so long to see this kind of change in our national sports teams?
The story that SA Rugby has been telling us for the last 21 years, since the dawn of democracy, as you say, 23 years since the Unity Agreement, that story is in fact a lie. And I think that's at the crux of this issue. Timing we can talk about. Cosatu has raised the concerns on the back of concerns that black players have raised from within the squad. So the timing is purely based on that. But the transformation lie that SARU has put forward over the last 21 years is unfolding in front of their eyes. They have, since 1995, presented transformation plan after transformation plan. There's been at least 5 of them. Each one of them have had a different name, the last one being the strategic transformation plan that they've put forward. That plan specifically talks about 50% representation at Currie Cup level, at Super 15 level, and a 30% plus at Springbok level in 2015. So that plan, which was presented recently, has already become obsolete. All their plans sit on dusty shelves. They're not implemented. There's no motivation to implement it. There's no initiative to implement it. There is an agenda that we obviously don't understand in terms of rugby. But the fact must be told, and more people are understanding this. There are more and more people around the country beginning to understand that this lie that's being told to us is a lie. We have had yesterday in George, rugby communities burning, attempting to burn the Springbok shirt. This has happened for the first time. If you look at Newlands has become an all-black home ground in all effect. And I think Springbok rugby at some stage, and the custodians of rugby in this country, which is SARU, have got to look at what is the reality. Let's be honest with ourselves, because if we're not honest with ourselves, we can't go forward.
Craig, I want to ask you then, what do you make of Dr. Asad's statement now saying that we're basically faced with a transformation lie, and that I'm sure that since we won the World Cup in 2007, there's so much more that could have been done to make sure that we do have full transformation or have more players of colours with our team going to the World Cup this year?
I mean, the situation is clearly unacceptable. But I wouldn't go so far as to just, run down South Africa and SARU. There are obviously some deeply ingrained problems. But when you look at the junior teams, and that's been going on for quite a long time, at least a decade, when you get the under 18, the under 20, representation with black players then will be even up to 50%. But there seems to be a problem when it gets to Springbok level. So the coach has to buy into the Springbok coach, and certainly Heineke Meyer, judging by his actions, he hasn't bought into transformation. So the talent is there, and SARU do spend a lot of money on development programs. As I say, it happens at the junior levels. But there's also a myth that black people don't have a culture of rugby, which is either just very racist or very ignorant, because there's a rich culture of rugby in the Eastern Cape amongst coloured people, amongst Muslim people. There have been some wonderful players. So there definitely, at the moment, seems to be like an injustice that the playing fields aren't level. And you can't, I'm a bit disappointed in the Minister of Sport, Mr. Razzmatazz. He's very sporadic and then gets on. At the moment, I think it's got a lot to do with the World Cup is 30, 40 days away. So you don't want to have a major upheaval now. That'll be, you've invested 4 years in this coach. So at some stage the minister will then get all gung-ho as well. Maybe they're hoping that the Springboks, and they will have a chance. Springboks are always dangerous to go and win the World Cup. You don't want to have major upheaval now. Maybe he's waiting for the time when there's a huge indaba into it. But the situation is clearly unacceptable. We're actually going backwards, because under Jake White and Peter de Villiers as well, there have been a few times where there were actually 7 or 8 players of colour in the Springbok team, and they've gone on to have great victories against Australia in particular. So we can't say that it can't happen overnight. It's been 20 years, and in '95 we had Chester Williams, and now in 2015 we have Brian Abana on the wing and a Zimbabwean-born Beast Matawira in the prop. So the situation is clearly unacceptable at the moment.
Craig, you just quickly touched on young talent there, and I'm sure that, with the likes of Craven Buick and things like that, we see that talent has to be coming through the ranks. But why is it then when it comes to Super Rugby, for instance, and then on a national level, we don't see the talent advancing to those specific squads?
Well, with a Springbok coach like Heineke Meyer and maybe the provincial coaches, they don't have enough confidence in these players. And obviously, Western Province, the Stormers, they had a coach of colour there, Alistair Coetzee, and they were the most transformed team, and they've been the most successful team. So I know Cricket South Africa have done in-depth studies into why that happens. Why do we have players at schoolboy level not going on further on, and it's a lot of socio-economic problems, situations and complications where they've worked out that young players, once they leave school, it's maybe not the same as a white player. They have to try and study, they have to try and find a job and play cricket. So maybe SA Rugby have to have a full-on, be proactive, work out why are players, why aren't the numbers coming up into senior levels. When it comes to this present coach, it's every time there's a 50-50 situation, he seems to go with the white player and not the black player. There have been so many situations. I remember 3 years ago, Sia Kolisi was on top form for the Stormers, There was a test match in Port Elizabeth where he comes from, and he brought in a guy, Jacques Potgieter from the Bulls, and there's been quite a trend where a guy like J.J. Engelbrecht, instead of Jean de Jong, who's probably the top player in the domestic level. So every time there is a 50-50 situation, he seems to go for players of his choice, and they're normally white players and players from the Bulls. So, you know, you don't want to go and run and try and attack the coach all the time. You give him the benefit of the doubt. But after 4 years, he's either I think he's extremely naive and very conservative.
What do you make of that, Dr. Asad, saying that it is our coach that is very conservative, and also that there are so many other socioeconomic factors that come into play when we want to see a full representation of all players in our teams?
No, of course there's socioeconomic factors, but I think I disagree a lot with what's been said by Craig, because we can confuse issues and add a lot of extra content to exactly what's happening. But it's quite clearly that there's a very simple issue at heart here. And the issue is racism in rugby. Craig just mentioned a very important fact. I mean, the best team in the Super 15, Super Rugby has been the Stormers. We're playing with 9 and 10 black players with a black coach. Now, why is it that a black coach can pick many more black players to play than a white coach in this country? Why is it that we have, when we have a white coach, that the 50-50 decisions go the way of the white player? So I think I think the first issue has to be, we have to look at racism and inherent racism before we address that. And rugby has been, you know, inundated with racism throughout its history, throughout its 100-year history. It's not a new thing. It's not something that's come to the fore recently. So I think once we address that issue, and that's part of the lie that's been told to us, that, you know, there isn't, we've sort of stamped out racism. We've come from a historic past of racism for 85 years. Springbok rugby had a horrendous history of racism. Suddenly it's gone. Suddenly we're now a rainbow nation, and we've forgotten all that, but we're still picking teams based on color. So I mean, I think that's the first issue. The second issue is that we have to look at development. If SARU, as the custodians of rugby, and saying we're investing lots of money in rugby, where is that money going? We're not seeing it in historically disadvantaged communities. The players that are coming through private schools and Model C schools, the black players of color. Where's the money being spent in terms of development in regions like Soweto, in regions like Khayelitsha, where there is a desire to play rugby, but there's no opportunity? Why has that not happened in 21 years? We have to ask that question. And I think it's much more simple than we're actually making it out to be.
Is it true, for instance, Craig, that we aren't seeing enough? And we know that with Cosatu's new calls on the minister to act urgently, what is it that we ultimately want to see, gentlemen?
Well, what do we want? Obviously, you want to see a successful Springbok team. If you win a World Cup, there's no doubt, we saw in 95, 2007, it does lift the spirit of the nation. But we want a fully representative side, that the whole country, the majority of the country, would feel secure in supporting, and that's not really happening at the moment, and hence you've got so many supporters supporting the All Blacks or not really buying into the South African thing. It's a deeply ingrained problem, and a lot of my colleagues in the media are guilty as well. When Peter de Villiers was the coach, whenever they won, and they won a lot of test matches, they had quite a lot of success. Whenever the team won, according to the media, it was because of the team that Peter de Villiers inherited from Jake White. Whenever the team lost, it was because he wasn't a very good coach. So it is a very deeply grained, complicated problem from the media to all sectors of South African rugby. But I wouldn't go and, I mean, a lot of the people running SA Rugby are people of color. I wouldn't say that they're racist at all. But they're certainly not doing their job properly. They are in influential positions. There's been a lot of lip service, and it's time that they got their act together.
Okay, then, Dr. Asad, just from the Anti-Racism Rugby Committee, what is your plea?
Well, our plea is first that rugby is inclusive of all people who want to play rugby in the country. That there isn't an agenda of exclusion, which is the case at the moment. We talk about the leadership being leadership of color. That means nothing if there are other people calling the shots behind that. And I think we must accept that in rugby, that there's a lot of money involved, there are a lot of people involved with other agendas, and that the leadership has failed to include people of color across the country in terms of playing rugby. The plea is quite simple. We cannot say it's too late. We're too late in the process, and we're now facing a World Cup. But when do we review our transformation? We go from Indaba to Indaba. We've done this with the minister, with the current minister, had an Indaba. We've had plans on the table. So why do we now say that it's too late, that we've shown leadership when we haven't? Why is it that people in Soweto still do not play rugby simply because they don't have the facility, simply because they don't have the opportunity to do so? They don't have there isn't an appetite at SARU to take rugby into Soweto, to take rugby into other townships. So until that happens, and why we waited 21 years to ask this question? I mean, why has the leadership that we say has been black for so long, why have we waited 21 years to take rugby into areas that are historically disadvantaged?
Well, Craig, I'm just going to quickly wrap up with you today. We're expecting a squad announcement. Is the pressure now on the Springbok management? What are you expecting to see from the announcement today?
I certainly hope that there will be some pressure. I've been reading some reports that the team that will be announced today has 4 black players, so and 1 on the bench. So that'll be a step in the right direction. But there'll still be a lot of players that haven't had opportunities, the likes of Elton, Yankees. Beyond colour, you want to see players have opportunities, especially when you're choosing a World Cup team. And when they don't get an opportunity, and there are a few white players as well that haven't had opportunities to stake their claim to the World Cup, but it's been predominantly black players. So we're hoping that it's sad that it's come to this. You'd hope that the coach would buy into transformation, and one has to feel for these black players. If they've been part of Heineke Meyer's squad for the last 3-4 years and they don't get to play, you can imagine it must be quite demoralizing that deep down that your coach doesn't have confidence in your ability. So we're hoping that the Springboks will do well, that there will be a side that going to the World Cup, which is pretty soon, that the whole of South Africa will support. That hasn't been the case so far. But after 21 years now, change has to happen, and hopefully it will happen. It certainly came to the fore last week, not just because the Springboks lost, it was the way that they lost, and that the coach is sticking with a largely all-white team that's been very unsuccessful, and there's a sense of injustice that a lot of those players, a lot of the black players aren't getting opportunities. So let's hope that changes going forward.
All right, well, Craig, Marrais, I thank you so much for joining us from Cape Town this morning. That is our sports reporter from Cape Town. Then Dr. Asad Bhorat from the Anti-Racism Rugby Committee. I thank you for joining us in this conversation this morning. Definitely an important conversation to have, and I'm sure this is not the last that we're going to be hearing on this debate weeks before we go into the Rugby World Cup.